Welcome to T21Mom.
Hi, friends, and welcome to the T21Mom podcast. My name is Mary, and I'm your host, and this is episode 90. On today's episode, I'm talking with Meeka Caldwell, who is another rockin' mom and an author. And we're talking about her series of books about her son, Anian, and being a Black family. And for me, it was a really eye-opening conversation because we were talking about things that I had never really thought about, about there being cultural differences, just her challenge in trying to find other Black families. And I really learned a lot, and I really appreciate her sharing her books and her time with me. So let's go have a listen. Today on the T21Mom podcast, I'm talking with Meeka Caldwell. We met at the retreat in Washington back in September. Welcome, Meeka.
Thank you. It was in September. It seems like it was, I know when I think about that time and me being on the scooter, sometimes it seems like it was so close because I'm still kind of getting through that ankle thing. So,
Oh my gosh, yes. So that was what I was going to ask you is how are you doing? Because I could totally commiserate with you because we've talked about it probably a lot on the podcast about my unfortunate incident and being on a scooter in a boot. I think it was 10 weeks. I don't even want to remember, to be honest.
right.
But how are you doing with the leg and everything now?
It's getting better. It's time. I think, as you know, it just takes time. So, like in physiotherapy now, so just working to walk without a limp. That's what I'm trying to do now, and to consciously do that. But that experience at the retreat, and I even wrote the hotel after if you have a question about that. But it was just difficult to get around because the carpet there and then the elevator bay and then the cobblestone on the bottom. I was done. I left early, actually, like that. Like it was a lot. It was a lot.
Yes. And I do recall like when I was on the scooter going to the mall and I realized like you don't think about it when you're able-bodied, but like when there's tile, you're hitting the ground. So there's a few times I nearly wiped out. It's scary. Like you think it all looks nice, but it makes it very challenging to get around when you're using a mobility device. And I
absolutely. And I
like,
had feedback for the Gaylord after that though, because while I'm in the boot and all that, that's temporary for me. But I was noticing that certain things just to get around, and I'm like, how is everyone else getting around if they have a more permanent mobility vehicle? Like, what does this look like? And I had wrote them because the carpet is not really conducive to wheels. And the elevator bay, once you press a button, literally you have to kind of wait. And then if you're not close to that one, you got to like scramble over there and then you got to start all over again. So I just kind of wrote them just, and especially the room, it was supposed to be like a handicap room. That's what it said, but the doors don't open. So if you're truly making it accessible, the doors don't open. So I was trying to figure out like what did you do? Like
what do you do?
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And that's great because you don't know until you're in it. And
exactly.
So well, I'm glad to hear that you're on the mend. So that's awesome news. Well, thank you so much for coming on today. And, before we get started about what we're going to talk about today, can you share a little bit about you and your family?
Sure. So, of course, Meeka Caldwell, I'm married. We have 6 children all together. So we have our older children who are out the home and one is in college. And then we have our younger children who are in the home. So the ages range from 8 all the way to 26. And we live in Maryland and we're always just doing something or other. So right now we're just trying to manage, school, remote work and living. But we are, we've been in this advocacy thing for a while, but that's our family. Our large, small family here.
Large, small family. I love it. I love big families.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, I grew up with 3 brothers. I mean, kind of close in size, but not quite to your family. But, now, and my daughter's just an only child. So I kind of miss that, the having a bigger family and a little bit of the chaos at times.
Yeah, it could be because, when it's quiet, you're just like, okay, you can take a break and rest, but then you are looking for that noise again. Like you are looking for things to be busy again. You can't help it. That's just how it is. So
it is. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, when we met at the retreat and
you were on your scooter, and I applaud you for coming, on a scooter and with those challenges, and that's really awesome. And I really hope that for the time that you were there, that you really enjoyed the retreat, because I know for me it's a big deal to go every year, and it means a lot, and it really fills my cup. So you were telling me about this really very cool and interesting project that you've been working on. Can you share what it is?
Sure. So I'm also an author in addition to being in HR. So I've written 3 books already, A Friend Anian, and we're working on the 4th book. I'm not going to give the title away, but yeah, the 4th book. So every time when I say I'm working on a book, it takes a little bit because I have the title, I have the idea, and I honestly just go with the experiences. The books are really just a snapshot of Anian and kind of what he does, what he goes through the day to day. So that's how I get the information.
Mhm.
So that's kind of what we're working on now, and hopefully, I mean, it's the beginning of 2023, we can get that published this year.
That's wonderful. And Anian is your son who with
Yes.
Down syndrome.
Yes, Anian is 8 years old. He's in the 3rd grade and is a subject of all the books. And my other children are in there. The little kids are in there too.
That's great. Now, when you've never written a book before, I take it then, until you started
No,
this series.
no, never, never. Maybe when I was younger. I mean, I love to read. I love to
Mhm.
read. And of course, when I'm younger, I'm writing my own little stories and things like that, but never to the point where I had anything published. So that was brand new for me.
Oh, that's a huge undertaking, and kudos to you. So you wrote your first book, A Friend Like Anian, and I love that name. Uh, what motivated and inspired you to write this book?
So, like we said, Anian is 8 years old. Anian has Down syndrome. And when he was born, I think I was just trying to figure out kind of what to bring. Like usually when we have World Down Syndrome Day or Down Syndrome Awareness Days or something like that, we go to the schools or we go to educate, we go to just share. And I noticed I didn't have any books that represented him. No books but Black children, Black families, even the books that were written by parents, those educational books or things
Mhm.
like that. And I just saw like, wait a second, there's something missing here. And I want to be able to go somewhere to, for him to be represented. It was very important to us. So after not seeing that, and especially not even any books with Down syndrome, period, like any children's books, it's very difficult to find. There are some, but
Mhm.
they're scarce,
Mhm.
So after noticing that and just also noticing lack of representation, that's why I had the idea to write the book. And I wanted to write it to share, right? I
Mhm.
wasn't thinking, oh, let me write this book and it's going to get published and I'm going to be on Oprah's wish list. I wasn't thinking any of that. I was just like, let me find something so he can have something for himself. Because I said, if nothing ever happens, he'll have his book. You know what I mean? He'll have
Mhm.
something to bring in. And that was what it was. And I had the thought a while ago before I even wrote the book. But it's the thing, like you said, I'm not an author. So it was trying to figure out, like, how do you even get this started? How do you write a book? How do you get it published? Who do you talk to? What resources do you need? How much does this cost? All those things were always in my mind. And then one day I was like, let me just try to reach out. So I was reaching out to different authors and people and things like that. And you have authors with different genres, and maybe they didn't do children's books. So, but I had this one friend who put me in touch with their friend who happens to be a publicist.
Mhm.
No experience in children's books, but he heard my story and he's like, I just want to help you. I want to help you go through this path. I want to tell you what to do. And then that's how it got published. Like it was such a labor of love from
Mhm.
those who heard it. And I was so grateful because, again, they don't publish children's books. And I think he was more like a self help person, but that's what they did. He had a publishing company and they took me through the steps. They helped me with the illustrator, they helped me with just kind of getting it all together, the editing. And then the wonderful, wonderful editor I had did that just pro bono my first book. And
Oh.
it was, yeah, it was one of those things where I just reached out and I said, hey, I got your name. And they were like, I'll do this. Like, I'll do this for you. And I'm like, wow. And so they're the
Yeah.
editor of my next book. So of course, they're getting compensated now. But it was just really people coming together to say, I love your story. I want your story to get out. This will help so many people. And it also had people notice when I mentioned the fact that there was a lack of representation. They would
Mhm.
go, oh, you know what? I never thought about that. And
Mhm.
you're right. Like, I never saw a book, I had TV, magazines, and that was where all the lack was because I remember when they told me about his diagnosis when I was in the geneticist's office, and I remember looking at them and I remember thinking, okay, well, what do I need? What supply? Like, what do I need? I don't know anything. And I
Mm-hmm.
said, well, do you have a family, specifically a Black family? Because I do believe the experiences are different that I could meet. And they said, no, we don't have any family. And this is in the DMV. And I'm like, wait a second. You have any family? And they're like, no, we don't have any family we can connect you with. Nothing.
Oh my gosh.
So, right, that's what I said. Just
Like,
like,
how
wait
can
a
that
second,
be?
how can that be? Right. So, but even after that, after Nine was born and all these things, I sent pictures back to that same office and I said to them, like, if you have anyone that's asking for the same thing that I did, you have a family now. So you can definitely
Wonderful.
direct them to me. They have it, but I feel like the more and more we talk and say and
Mm-hmm.
share, the
Mm-hmm.
more and more people will see that we're out here. You know what I mean? So
Mm-hmm.
that's
Mm-hmm.
that's pretty much what it was. Yeah,
So did you have a prenatal diagnosis then?
I did. I
Yeah.
did. Yeah, at
Yeah.
15 weeks, and I think it was a regular testing that I always say, okay, yeah, go ahead, because
Mm-hmm.
I think I was advanced maternal age, quote unquote.
Yeah.
I had 2 kids before, and so I'm thinking routine, and do what you need to do just to make sure. But
Mm-hmm.
and so I just wasn't thinking that. I wasn't thinking at all.
Of
And
course.
again, yeah, because and they tell you, that we're gonna test for, Down syndrome, we're gonna test for this, we're gonna test for that. They give you like the whole list of genetics, and so you're just like, okay, cool, you can test for it all. But I think I just didn't think at all that that was going to be the diagnosis,
Mm-hmm.
especially because I'd never seen a Black child with Down syndrome. I don't think I thought that it couldn't be. I just
Mm-hmm.
wasn't thinking of it at all.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so when I got the diagnosis, it was just like, okay, now what? Now, and because I
Mm-hmm.
didn't see anybody, I'm just like, now I got to go find my people. I got to go figure this out. But it was difficult because of how the diagnosis was delivered. I think a lot of parents that I talk to have this
Mm-hmm.
similar story about how it was delivered, and they're saying, "Oh, hey, you can just abort. Here you go. This is the option," and that's like the first option they gave me.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, and his picture was on the screen, and they're giving me, and I'm like, this is. I just want to know if I could still breastfeed. I just want to know if I could still, if there's any particular crib I need. I just wanted to know, what to know. I didn't.
Yeah.
That's not the information I needed. And they give the information solo just with that. They don't give any other information to say,
Mm-hmm.
well, hey, these are the support groups. This is this. If
Mm-hmm.
they don't give any of that, because I feel like it's delivered with such a sad um, way that
Mm-hmm.
it's just shocking. And you're happy, you're pregnant, you have a baby, and they're just the faces were just sunken, and it's just like, we have to tell you. And I'm just like, okay, like, where's the bad news? People, I
Yeah.
don't see anything yet. But you don't know that until you kind of get into it. But I think,
Mm-hmm.
the community has been working to change how those are delivered,
Mm-hmm.
especially because that's very important for students that's coming in and training, and for doctors to understand that give parents all choices. You know what I
Yes.
mean? Tell them all the things. It's not all negative. It's not
Mm-hmm.
all positive all the time, but
Like any
it's
child,
any child. Exactly. Let's just
right?
treat this to give me all the information and let us make informed decisions. Yes.
Mm-hmm. And I like what you said about, there wasn't any representation, like you couldn't find anything on with Black children. And when we had talked previously, I began to think about that and I thought, you're right. Like, I'm a Caucasian, so obviously our perspectives are going to be different,
Mhm.
obviously. And I thought back, like you're right, there aren't a lot of children's books out there. They're scarce. But everything I've seen, like ads,
Right.
any kind of social media or any kind of publicity or for whatever, I think it's almost always been like a white baby with Down
Mhm.
syndrome. I haven't seen any other diversity that I can recall, but I hadn't thought about it until we had chatted, and I thought, how could I not notice that? But I guess like
Mhm.
until you're in it, and the same with Down syndrome, until you're in it, you don't really notice it. But it's, I think, our jobs to change that perspective, which is what you're doing with your books.
Yes. Yes.
And so when you first wrote the first book, like, did you always have it in your mind that it was going to be a series, or did it just sort of kind of grow organically that, yeah, I think this can be a series?
I think it grew organically because, again, I was just thinking of that first book. Like, let me get this done, because it seemed like such a monumental effort of getting the information, trying to find people to help, trying to get just the publishing industry understood. How does this work? So I think I thought like the first book, but when the first book was received well, and I realized the first book was literally, it was him and
Mhm.
so many things that he does in school and at home and experiences with his sisters and friends. Like we could tell his story in a more ways. So the
Mhm.
second book and the third book, and then I'm thinking of just all the things that when you talk to other parents, all the things that we share, when we talk
Mhm.
about school or we talk about discipline or we talk about behavior, we talk about potty training, all those things that we all share and we all get tips from each other.
Mhm.
That's what I'm thinking, like to have those experiences of him in the book so I can share it with other people. So I think after that first book, I said, okay, let me write the second. And then the second was, oh, I got an idea for the third. And now the third is, oh, I have an idea for the fourth. So I feel like as long as we have those ideas, as long as he's doing things, and I know I can help other families just deal with whatever,
Mhm.
because it always comes to my mind, even like when we're struggling with like the car seat. That's another thing. Like our
Mhm.
kids in the car seats, they all always unbuckle, and that might be another idea just to help them like
Yeah.
stay in your car seat. So that's the things that I think of, because those are stories that I don't have to make up. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? These are
Yes.
just those life stories that you could just write down on paper and try to get them to where school age children can understand them.
Mhm. And what I liked about the books, which are wonderful, is that it's representative for every child or any
Yeah.
family with a child with Down syndrome. It, it doesn't have to be about race or what have you. It's for anybody, but it's nice to
Hmm.
see that representation and to like see your families in the books. And I just wanted to comment that I really loved the illustrations in the second and third books. They're awesome. They look like your family. I thought they were like really well done. So that's awesome.
Yes, yes, and shout out to my illustrator Cameron Wilson. But the first book, like I said, it was a lot of learning, a lot of
Hmm.
figuring out, a lot of learning about illustrators and the tools they use, and vetting people and trying to see who could. And so when after the first book was out, the illustrator for the first book, thank you, because I still know that illustrator.
Hmm.
They're still doing good work, but for me, I just wanted something a little different, like you said, more geared towards how our family looks. And so when I look for the second illustrator, I had a friend who also does children's books. She does
Hmm.
the Jazz Jackson series. She referred me to her illustrator, and so when I sent him a picture of my son, this is why I chose him. I sent him a picture of my son, and I said, just let me see how you're going to draw him. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
I think a lot of illustrators ask for that, and so when he sent the picture back to me, I noticed that he had one of Anand's eyes were smaller than the other. And I looked at the picture, I was like, why did you draw his eye? Like one eye smaller than the other. He's like, well, that's how all the pictures look. Now, mind you, when you look at your children,
You don't
you
see
see your
them.
children, you don't see that. So, and I had told him, I think I had told him, like, oh, look on my Facebook page, you can kind of see him in action, just different pictures you can kind of click on. And so when he sent his rendition back to me, I was looking at this like, no, he didn't. Just make my child have a smaller eye and da da da. But when I looked back at all the pictures, it was true. And I said, you know what? He paid attention, and that's
Yeah.
what I wanted him to do more so, because again, I didn't notice it, and now when I look at it, I was like, that's him. If people, because I see it every day, but the
Yeah.
fact that he noticed that, the fact that he put it in there, the fact that he
Hmm.
didn't erase it, the fact that he made him all him, and whatever things that he had, he made him, and he kept it. He didn't think, oh well, mom might not want to see this. He said, this is who she gave me. This is who I'm going to draw, and kept it true to reality. And that's when I said, okay, that's it. You got me, because you're a professional and you see those
Hmm.
things as an illustrator should, that I don't see. So that's what I wanted in the book. Yeah.
Oh, that's so lovely. That's really wonderful to hear. Now, you sort of mentioned like you just like you're kind of just keep going. Like, did you have a plan for the number of books, or are you just going to see where it takes you?
At first, I did have a number, but I feel like don't limit it. Let me
Hmm.
just go ahead and see where it takes me. Because honestly, if I do a book this year, then I don't do another book for 2 years. Or if I do something in between, it's all for the same thing.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? So I
Hmm.
don't put a number on it. And Nine is only 8. So who knows how
Yeah.
how his adventures will take him. And then because his siblings are involved, that's another thing, that a lot of families have siblings. You know what I mean? And so
Yeah.
those interactions should be in there
Hmm.
too. And if he has a dog, and those interactions. So I don't know where it's going to end, honestly. I'm just don't know wherever it ends.
That's so awesome. I love it. And when you finally got your first book published, what did that feel like for you? Was it kind of emotional at all, or?
I think it was because it was. I think I just kept saying like, I wrote a book. Like I actually wrote a book. Like I wrote a book. Like, and I'm and I always tell people like I'm not an author. People say yes you are. I was like
Mhm.
okay, now I'm understanding. But it was like I wrote a book. Oh my gosh! And then just to show him the book and to show him like this is you in the book and to show his it was just like he's like that's me, that's you in the book. And it was emotional because it was something that I had said that I wanted to do, and it wasn't just for him, and it was for anyone who could benefit to show children in their natural environment and how you can help. And I figured, okay, I'll write it and maybe I'll just keep a copy for myself. And
Yeah.
it wasn't, but it was received so well. And I think that I didn't realize how much people said, oh, we needed this book. Like, we needed something like this. So
Hmm.
I always encourage the parents of your child, whether you have whatever it
Hmm.
is, write it. I mean,
Hmm.
I don't want to be the only one writing,
Yeah.
um, but anyone else can do the exact same thing, and I encourage anyone to do it because we definitely need more books regarding children with Down syndrome to share with our schools, our healthcare workers, anyone, and then we definitely need ones that represent our community.
Hmm. Yes, because like off the top of my head, I can think of maybe four
I was
books.
about to say five. I was waiting for you to say the numbers. I was going to say four too. Like I
Yeah.
can maybe four, and that's not. And those aren't recent. Well, the ones I remember aren't like recent. So it's like
Hmm.
as we're going through the years, let's see what we can do. You know what I mean?
Yes, and I think you're right. I think there's definitely space for everyone there to share their story. And
Mm-hmm.
like nowadays I I mean, you could tell me if this is true or not, but I think it's almost a little easier to get things published. I have a friend who she published some children's books, and she does it through Amazon. The first time she did it through a publisher, but now she does it through Amazon. I go, wow, I was asking her about it, and I couldn't believe that you could just do it like that. So, yeah.
Yeah, and that's what I learned for the second and third books. I'm self-published. We ended up creating a publishing company, Brown Baby 321 Publishing, when we made the books. And I just do it all myself. So
Hmm.
I have the same illustrator, the editor is still there, and it's just myself. And and I tell people because people have reached out to say, oh, how do you do this? I want to write a book. Um, and if you want to go to publish a company, absolutely, that's your choice, but you can
Hmm.
do it yourself too. And you can make a company out of that if you want to do anything else. But it's not as hard as I thought it would be.
Hmm.
Um, it's actually very simple. And for any authors, I just say, just get your story. Once you get your story, don't worry about anything else. Just get your story, and then the rest will come. Like it's not that hard to do. So I'm like, everyone, just let's write a book. We can have a book writing conference, but yeah, it's easy. It's pretty easy.
That is really cool to hear. So maybe that could be another project I could delve
Yeah.
into.
Yes, you can.
I've had a few ideas swirling in my head. So you're a Black woman, and I know you've said that one of the main reasons you decided to write this book was because when you went looking for books with a child like Anian, you couldn't find any, that there was no representation. How did this make you feel?
Um, thought of last, excluded because
Hmm.
you're trying to figure out when you see something missing, you go and find it. But it's
Hmm.
like obviously someone didn't see anything missing, so we don't have those books to share. But it also made me feel empowered because sometimes it's that voice that, is the loudest that gets things are able to get things done. So I just felt honored to be able to have this idea and have the book and write it and publish
Hmm.
it. But it did make me feel like confused, like, wait a second, because I know that, I've met families since then, of course. And so I'm trying to always figure out like where is that gap? Where is the reach out? What is the community doing? How are we embracing our families? You know what I
Hmm.
mean? And early on when I think it was just like Facebook. We did something for World Down Syndrome Day where we did like the colors of Down syndrome, and there was a video on Facebook. I think it's on our old page that showed just different cultures. and
Mm-hmm.
how they have children with Down syndrome. So you might have someone in a different country.
Mm-hmm.
You might have someone on a different continent. You might have someone with a different religion. If you have someone, you know, and there's all different things in different communities. It might be stigmas, or it might be just like the resources of where you are. I've talked to parents that have been in Japan.
Mm-hmm.
They might be, you know, expats in Japan, and they've said, oh, you know, it's completely different here. Like they don't really have anything where
Yeah.
I am that my child just goes to school, but I have to find X, Y, and Z. And it's been really interesting to figure out, you know, just around the world, how are we dealing with this in our different communities?
Mm-hmm.
Um, I've met someone that lives in, I believe, Ghana, and she's,
Mm-hmm.
you know, helping people in her community educate and give resources and celebrate. And so you always look at that and wonder here, you know what I mean? When we have a
Mm-hmm.
lot of diversity, then why is it missing, and what does this look
Mm-hmm.
like? And yeah, so I felt like, okay, yeah, we were left out, but let's we belong everywhere. So let's take
Mm-hmm.
this book and get it out and make sure people understand about our children, about our loved ones, our family members, and even as they grow up, you know, he'll
Mm-hmm.
always have this book to show, yeah, where
Oh,
there are
that's
Black people with Down syndrome, absolutely.
I love that. So you kind of touched on it briefly, but so how has the book been received?
It's been actually received really well. I think when I was first doing the first book, I would like post on social media and say it's coming, and then when it hit the shelves on Amazon and all those other places, it was really received well. I was able to do a few podcasts with doctors. I was able to join in on talking to medical students,
Mm-hmm.
just giving thoughts and opinions. It's been really, really good. I think this last year, the pandemic, it was kind of quiet
Mm-hmm.
as everyone's dealing with everything. But I feel like I'm ready to get back in to try to do that fourth book and talk to some more, because I think it's just an education thing for our up and coming medical community too.
Mm-hmm.
And also for the current ones that are here. I mean, I always like to just drop the book off places.
Mm-hmm.
Like if I'm in the doctor's, I'll just drop the book off, or I'll just drop a card off, or you never know what families are in there. But I think it was received really well, more than I thought,
Mm-hmm.
but it got spread around so much. And I love it, because when I go into places and see it, and I remember I was doing a vending show in my local community. It's like a community thing, you vend, and a little girl came up to me and she's like, "Oh my gosh, I saw your books in the doctor's office." Now I don't know what doctor she went to. I don't know anything, but I was
Yeah,
just like, my heart was warmed because she remembered the book, and she
that's
came up,
awesome.
and it was in her doctor's office. And I, you know, that, not like I knew her, but I was just
Yeah.
like, "Oh my gosh, you made it to your doctor's office." Or I think I had a coworker actually share the books with the library that it wasn't even in my state. I cannot remember the state, but the fact that it's spreading like that, I love it and I appreciate it, and that's what it's meant to do.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that is so wonderful to see, and what an awesome feeling. And I'm sure for like lots of families like yours, who are Black or maybe another race, when they see the book, like, like you said, like you felt excluded and, that nobody's seeing you, that finally someone's saying, yes, like
Hmm.
somebody sees me and, I don't feel so alone. And like you said, I think we all have a story to share,
Right.
and sometimes like people have more of the gumption to go and do it like yourself. But yeah, we do need more people out there sharing the stories about our kids, and especially, about diversity amongst Down syndrome, because it's there, it's everywhere.
Yes, yes. And then just also with other different abilities. I have a friend
Mhm.
who wrote, same illustrator. I share the illustrator with her, but she wrote Cerebral Palsy Party.
Mhm.
And it's out, and I was just like so proud of her writing that book, because she has cerebral palsy and she has been trying to write this book and get it out, and it's just wonderful. Like that's what I look forward to, seeing
Mhm.
people use their platform and use the
Mhm.
experiences they have to share with other people, and in the form of a book, especially for children who, you know, we always try to teach our children how to embrace others and how to be inclusive and how to be kind and nice. And I think this shows that, you know, when you have a book like that and you're reading about a child either with Down syndrome or cerebral palsy or any other ability, like this is, you know, it's regular. It's not anything that, oh, this is so different, or I
Mhm.
don't know how to react, or I don't know what to say. These are things that will help our children communicate and how to understand people that might be a little bit different than them, but may just need some assistance, or, you know, how do you approach and how do you be comfortable? And this helps parents too, because children are way more inquisitive and sometimes
Mhm.
kinder than adults. So
Yep.
they teach they
Mhm.
teach the adults. So
Mhm.
I'm just, when I see books like that and I see people who are taking that initiative and who have that ability to do that, it just makes me so happy because I'm buying the book and I'm sharing your books and I'm anything that I can do so that we can just go around and make sure that it's out there and that people see it and people understand.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And I know, like, just in our Down syndrome community, like, there's always like a general like lack of representation in mainstream media, and but people always get excited when we see our kids in the mainstream media. But like I said, like, I don't often see cultural diversity in that. So
Hmm.
hopefully, with your book, we can start shifting that narrative a little bit. And like we said, Down syndrome's everywhere. It's not
Right.
just it's not just for the Caucasian kids that have Down syndrome, right?
Right, exactly.
So, like, for me personally, I'm a single mom by choice, and having a child with Down syndrome, it was easy to feel isolated, like you said, as I didn't know anyone similar to me. And so you mentioned you felt this way at all. Like, was it challenging to try to find other Black families with a child with Down syndrome? Like you said, that the geneticist's office, they knew no one, which I find hard to believe, but
Right.
you know,
Me too. Yeah. It honestly, after that, I think I researched a little more and eventually found a wonderful online community.
hmm
There's an African American families of children with Down syndrome on Facebook, and I think I found them first. I think I was just Googling.
hmm
And that was online. And then it was just like, the sun opened up and it was like,
hmm
oh, it was thousands of families. So
yeah.
that's where I first found other Black families, but also my community. I think after I had the diagnosis and I realized that there was just a gap, like I'm not seen, I feel like I was alert more when I would
hmm
see people out and I would
hmm
see and I would think, I think they're a child with Down syndrome. Let me go and say hi. It's one of those things where you just kind of come out of yourself because you're just
hmm
thinking, I don't want them to feel like I did. Like, hey, we're both here. So I would do that, but I think it took just a second, and then I found the online community. I think more and more when I just networked and
hmm
try to find people, I did more. And then ironically, the when I was pregnant with him, I actually was working for an organization that supported people with disabilities on federal government contracts
hmm
for employment. And so it was so ironic because I'm like, well, wait a minute, I know there's a lot of families probably here, but it was just all those connections that eventually were made. And then you find the community, and then you realize maybe some of the challenges or things like that, and that's where you try to lend your energy after that. But yeah, it didn't take me long because I was looking. So I did, I did find, yes.
hmm hmm Yeah, I love finding other single moms by choice. I mean, I do have a partner now, but in the early years, it was just me and my daughter, and so it was nice to finally meet. There's not a lot of us as single moms
Hmm.
by choice with a child with Down syndrome, but there is a small group of us out there, and it's always nice to meet up. And I did meet with one mom at the retreat, so that was lovely. I'd been following her forever on Facebook, and so it was nice to finally meet her in person. Just because we like like yourself, you have similar things in common and things that you can share. So
Yeah, absolutely.
it was wonderful. Now, when you started writing your first book, A Friend Anian, who did you want it to reach? Like, who did you want to be reading the book? Was it just Black families or the schools, or who did you
It
have an
was
audience in mind, or everyone?
honestly, no, yeah, everyone. That was my audience, was everyone.
Yeah.
Um, because I just wanted to share the story. And I
Mhm.
felt like, writing the story and absolutely having him represented, it could benefit everyone.
Mhm.
Um, of course, people always ask me, like, oh, what if, your children's books, what ages are they from? The ages that either you are being read to, or you
Mhm.
can read, or you can share it with an adult, or, healthcare workers or education, or I've had, I think in second grade, I believe, like his teacher read the book. I didn't even know she was going to read the book. It was like a reading thing, and she read the book, and I was like, oh, and I didn't even tell her I had a book. I think I guess she Googled or something like that.
Mhm.
But those are things I love because you find it and you realize, well, the teachers might be looking for something like this. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Just because they're aware of maybe Down syndrome, World Down Syndrome Day or Down Syndrome Awareness Month, they might be looking. Or you might have a healthcare worker who is trying to just bring, just difference in their office or something like that, or trying to connect with the community. They could read the book. And then you have children who are just curious about other books for other children, and they might read the book. So I really felt like it was for everyone because
Mhm.
no matter whose hands it ended up in, it could help someone that's connected to that hand if it's not helping that hand itself. So I just
Mhm.
felt like it was just universal that it could. And that I felt like that's what it did, because when people reached out, it was either, you have parents, you have teachers, you have doctors, you have, therapists and things like that. So it's like it did what it was intended to do, which was get to the people.
Mhm.
Um, yeah.
Oh, that's amazing. Now, when I read the first book, I felt, I thought this is a great way to introduce kindergarten to a child, whether they have
Mm-hmm.
Down syndrome or not. It didn't really matter. And I really felt in the book that you portrayed Anian like any other little boy, and that, yes, he has Down syndrome, but it's just a part of who he is. It doesn't define him,
Mm-hmm.
and I think for us in the Down syndrome community, that's important. You hear that a lot. Like it's a part, Down syndrome is a part of my child, but it doesn't define them. So yeah, I thought it was a great way for parents to just let their kid know what kindergarten's about and what it's going to be like,
Yeah,
you
yeah,
know?
thank you. And I think that was most from his kindergarten, because it's not like every child loves school. So I also thought like, oh, just in case someone's having like, anxiety towards just starting the school, this will be good too because we get through the day. But yeah, I like that one for kindergarten, because I was just trying to recall like, well, what happened in kindergarten, and
Hmm.
then what happens when you make a friend, and how do
Hmm.
people relate to you? And but again, like you said, that's where a lot of children, you know what I mean, just
Hmm.
trying to make your way and try to figure out this whole school thing if you've been home or whatever it looked like before you hit school. So
Hmm.
yeah.
Hmm. I often feel we have to fight like so hard for our kids to advocate for pretty much everything. And that having Down syndrome, our kids are often segregated or even discriminated against because of their extra chromosome. And for my daughter, I've often come across diagnostic overshadowing with medical personnel saying, or alluding to, oh, because she has Down syndrome, or it's a Down syndrome thing.
Mhm.
And I mean, you have other children before Anian, and have you experienced where he has been treated differently because he is Black and because he has Down syndrome?
Um, you know what? It's either because he's a little Black boy, because I
Hmm.
think that's a thing too. And Down syndrome. I think people just automatically, for our children especially, I think people automatically think, um, like I can't talk to him because
Hmm.
he's not going to understand what I'm going to say. And so I'm like, just ask him the question and see what happens.
Yeah.
And always, address him. And I think that happens. I think for him having Down syndrome, I think that happens a lot when, when you go into the healthcare facilities and they tend to say, oh, mom, so what's this and what's that, or what's he doing? And I was like, let's go ask him. Like, even though
Hmm.
let's figure out, let's start that communication, because he definitely understands when people either address him or don't address him or try to ignore him, because he will do the same thing back. So it's one of those things where that happens. But I also see in the school systems where people may not see it as much or people may not understand it, but there is, when you have a Black child in the school system, and let's say it's a behavior thing, I do believe people look at that. They look at the fact that he's Black, they look at the fact that he's male, and they look at the fact that he has Down syndrome. But I do
Mm.
sometimes believe that Black and male comes first, because there's just inherent racism in the school system and how we do things that
Mhm.
I don't think people see up front. So when you hear about them trying to, if it's a Black male, them trying to, oh, he's suspended for 5 days or fighting, or they're never trying to address anything underlying. I think it's just an immediate judgment. But
Mhm.
that's how I have to focus, because he's going to grow up, and at times we know the history now of our country and of racism. And then when you see a Black child, and let's say he might not be fully verbal, and you're
Mhm.
trying to ask or trying to get commands and things like that, people might mistake him for doing something bad, or for ignoring, or for having some type of attitude And because they're looking at that Black male. So they're already having assumptions and bias already. And then top that off with the fact that he has Down syndrome. And then it's a whole nother thing because you're not understanding just the intricacies that it takes, or maybe the attention that he has to give you, or maybe the speech that you're trying to get from him in any particular situation. So I think that happens often, but in the ways that sometimes we can't see, like I said, especially in the education system. But sometimes we do see that in the healthcare system. I know I've experienced it where I'm with a provider and I'm telling them this is how he can work with you, and this is how he responds to things, and people aren't listening, and I don't like that when they, like you said, just automatically put, well, that's because they have Down syndrome. No, that's because you haven't talked to them. That's because you haven't addressed them. That's because you haven't addressed them as a human and as a person. Even though they might be 8, 7, 6, our children can understand everything. So, don't just always assume that they're not competent to speak to you, to communicate with you, and always know that, speaking shouldn't always be a requirement. They're showing you things. Their behavior shows you, their actions, their body language. So we have to lean in a little bit more. But that's how we as families and parents have to do. We have to watch those who interact with our children to make sure that they feel empowered too, because that's how we have to grow them up. I'm the voice now, but Anian's going to have his voice, and he's being taught his voice. And I want him to understand and learn that. But it happens now as he's seen people, how they address him and how they look at him and how they ask him questions. And he gets upset if you don't ask him what you're asking someone else, or if you don't address him. And right now he's stuck on, he has to be called his full name. So I'm wondering, like in school, I wonder if he's doing, because I can't say, oh, hey, sweetie, hey, it has to be Anian Caldwell. And I'm like, what? That's the full name, not just Anian. But even if I say, oh, good night, baby, he's like, no, baby, Anian Caldwell. I'm like, okay. And that's been happening for the last couple of weeks. So never know if that might be in a book, like call me by my name. But that's been happening. But that just makes me think he's aware of himself. He's aware of how people address him. So it could have happened that someone was saying something to him. He's like, no, I'm just going to tell them my name because that's better. So you just never know. But yeah, I have had situations where it's either both or separately, but it's all noticed.
And he's also got quite a cute nickname that you guys call him.
Oh yeah, Boothang.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I think that's phasing out because again, I got to call him Anian Caldwell. And my husband calls him Bug, but we can't do that. It's Anian Caldwell. I think I tried to say like sweetie, honey, baby, but nope, it's Anian Caldwell. And he will get upset if you don't say the last name, because I'll try to be like, okay, Anian. He's like, no, Anian Caldwell. I was like, okay, we're going to figure this one out. So yeah.
So funny, because usually when you're called by your whole name, it usually means you're in trouble.
Right.
I love it. That is so awesome. Why do you think there is a lack of representation of people who are Black and have Down syndrome?
As I can only speak for me, because I don't, I think one, it might be just the personal business that sometimes the Black community holds close. Like, this is my family, this is me, I don't want to divulge, this is what we're dealing with it. And that's like a generational thing, I think. That's just that. And then I think also, again, like when we have different committees or whatever the case is, mom groups, whatever, I think that people don't speak up to see that there's something missing. You know what I mean? Like, I know we have more families than this, and people just to say, hey, we don't have any diversity in this group. We don't have diversity in the moms group and this resource group. Oh, hey, how did we give to, Black organizations today? They're not saying that. So I think it's just a lot of maybe the community just wanted to keep things personal to themselves. And also, this is typical for a lot of families. A lot of families just don't want to focus on it. And I feel like sometimes they think, once we dive into this Down syndrome thing, it's going to become a whole thing and I'm going to plan everything. And no, we don't have to go to every Down syndrome event. I don't have to be a part of every Down syndrome club. But I feel like some people just stop because it's like, I don't want to be overwhelmed with it. But then I also think that people aren't speaking up to say if someone's missing at the table in a way that we're making decisions and we're making things for the community because the communities are not represented at this table, then someone needs to step up and say, we don't have all the community voices here. So what does that look like when we do have the community voices, especially when we're trying to help? So if it's in the terms of like resources or things like that, or you're getting together, like you said, like you've met parents, of single moms by choice. But what if it was another group saying, hey, I wonder what single moms by choice thought about this, but no one's at the table like that. Then they would go and find to get that voice. But I don't think people speak up enough, or people think, well, it's okay because we're going to serve everybody. But it doesn't always happen like that. And I think it's that relationship and that connection building, because I've denied many of people who ask me for, oh, let me have, your son's picture. I'm having this thing. I would love for him to be on the flyer. And my first question is, who is your flyer serving? What are you doing? Whose communities? Is it going to reach mine? Because I'm not going to do it as a photo op and as just for his face if you're not doing anything for the community. And I got so many people who just don't say anything. They just ignore it after that, or whatever the case is, because that's the question. If you want to say, we're building this relationship, we're building these communities, then I don't need you to do it for optics. I need you to actually build those relationships and build those communities. And I need you to figure out how. And if you don't know how, then that's when those organizations that have the funding and the resources to help those smaller organizations, be it ones that focus on cultural diversity, Black organizations, or things like that, or even people with English as a second language who may be traveling this IEP road and all those roads lonely. But I need them to look for those voices who they're trying to say they're representing, who they're trying to give resources to. And I think that's one of the main focuses, is that we don't say it. So we have to have some people that are bold to say, well, wait a minute, I want to make sure this money goes to so-and-so. I want to make sure we get to the ends of this. Even when it comes to counties, and depending on what state you're in, I don't know, but depending on counties that may be a little bit more rural or don't have a lot of stuff, we need to think about all the people. So I think that's what happens. I think it's a thing of privacy, and I think it's things of not people speaking up. And then also that smaller thing of people say, I don't want to make this a whole big deal. You know what I mean? And that's fine. And that's fine too. But yeah, I think it's a combination, and maybe some other things that I don't know.
No, I love that. That's, yeah, you nailed it totally. And do you feel there's a different level of acceptance of Down syndrome, or any disability for that matter, in the Black community and the white community?
I don't know if it's a different level of acceptance. I think it's just the way we are. I think it may be all accepted, but it's a different take on it. Because it's hard, because I think for new parents, when they come in, I feel like you have to be real with new parents too. Because a lot of people, and I don't know what community, but a lot of people just want to be like, oh my gosh, it's so wonderful, and this and that and the other. And some people are like, well, not all of it's wonderful. So we got to be honest with that. And it's not always rainbows and butterflies.
Yeah.
And that's like that real voice that has to get. But I think that's shared with all communities, that you try to be that reality piece in it, but also understand that doesn't mean you give up. And that's the worst thing ever, is just you understanding there may be challenges for some that it's not for others. But I don't know about the acceptance piece. I think it's just how it's received and how it's handled is different, and how the reach out is different, and how the networking is different. You know what I mean? I do notice, just depending on where you are and what table you're at, there might be people with tons and tons of resources that have tons and tons of connections, but it's not shared to those other places that don't have as many. Because I've done that before. I've tried to raise money, and I've said, hey, to other organizations, hey, you've had this wonderful person do X, Y, and Z for you. Can you share them with me? And it's been, well, and it's like, well, wait a minute, aren't we all trying to do the same thing? So I think it's just the way it's done. I think it's just the way it's felt in the communities.
That's really interesting. Yeah, because I'm just seeing it from my own perspective. So I love hearing other perspectives on this. After we met at the retreat, I began thinking about what you had said, that you couldn't find any representation. And other than the show Born This Way, which you're probably familiar with, I'm not sure, where one of the cast members, John Tucker, he's hilarious, I loved him. He was Black, and actor Jamie Foxx's sister, who has had Down syndrome. She's passed away, I think, a few years ago. I can't recall ever seeing a Black child with Down syndrome in any media. I hadn't even, like I said before, I hadn't even thought about it. I would just get excited when I would see a rocking kiddo on a commercial or an ad, but they were always white. But I hope that we can change that and just see, like I said, diversity all across the board. And you're starting this. When you learned at about 15 weeks, I think you said, that Anian would be born with Down syndrome, did you ever think you would be the one leading the way, giving representation within within and for the Black community and the Down syndrome community?
No, that wasn't the first thought. That wasn't the first thought. I definitely, I think just me starting like do my research and stuff like that. I know I felt that there needs to be stuff done, and I'm always the person like, yes, I'll do this, yes, I'll do this. But I was more like a learning thing, like, how does this work for other families? What does this look like? And just knowing that, he wasn't yet to be born, so I don't even know what's going to happen yet. But I think I was in that mode of like researching and getting things done. And I think after he was born, when I found that, we did need a little bit more representation, we did need more resources. I didn't think that, I don't think I'm the only one doing it. I just think that sometimes you have just different pockets of community where you can do it. And also you have parents that have children that are a little bit older who said, we fought the good fight. We've been fighting, and we need other people to take over because it gets exhausting. So that's why I love meeting parents with children that are a little bit older, because again, and I am 8, so I don't know what 10 looks like, 12, 14, 18, what, 20 something? I have no clue. But that's why I think sometimes, you have those families or parents who've started things, who've been that voice, but maybe change is really slow and they're tired. They're like, okay, my child's about to go off to college. Hand off, like I need to hand this off to somebody else. And so that's, I feel like, where I came in. It's just another handoff from some voices that have already been there and trying to do the things that we all should be doing or have time to. And I always tell parents, it doesn't matter. Like, I don't want people to feel like, oh, you have to just jump on this board or you have to just do it. No. You can just, it starts within your household. And then however you want to share or disseminate information, that's what you do. Whatever you have the capacity for, whatever you have the passion for, that's what you do. And if it's just in teaching your child to be a good citizen in the world, that's what you do. So, and for other people that want to have louder voices, other people that want to do more things, that's what you do. So it's like we all have a space here and we all have things to do, but I feel like it's a passing of torches all the time because you have people in different spots just going, okay, I've done this, now I got to stop, next person, because I have to handle this. And we know how sometimes it could be with managing households with a child with Down syndrome and any other different ability. There's a lot of schedules and stuff like that. So I just feel like I'm not the only voice. I'm not going to be the last one, definitely not the first one. But if we all speak up, it's going to be the loud voice, and it's going to be good, and it's going to make changes. And if we just keep grabbing the torches as we see fit, as we are comfortable with, that this can keep going on and it can go past awareness, because I think we're all aware. We're here. Now it's on to inclusion. Now it's on to, equal rights. Now it's on to proper education. Now it's on to careers. Now it's on to all those other things. But I'm just glad to be, to be able to say something, to be a part of it, even if it was a little ripple with the book. That's good. You know what I mean? However you place yourself in there, that's good, because you're helping your child, but you're helping so many others, because everything that some person does is just not for them. The book, it's not just for Anian. I mean, I can't even imagine the other children that are going to come after and kind of do the things that I did and kind of research and go, oh, this book was written in 2019, and go, wow. You know what I mean? So it's just a step. I just want people to keep stepping, keep climbing. Let's keep joining together and do this for our family.
Oh, I love that. I love it. How has being an advocate and, I would say, a bit of a trailblazer within both the Black and Down syndrome communities changed you?
I think I have a lot more work to do. I think that it is one of those things where I'm trying to learn more, and I think that's how it's changed me, and it's made me think about my career progression. Like, what do I want to do? And I've had this passion to get into disability policy, and I think that's the thing that's changed, because seeing him through school and hearing other people's stories, and not just in school, but just how they're treated in healthcare or on the job, or just the things that they have to fight for. It's like, I don't want this to keep happening. How does this come down? How do I learn about how policy trickles down? How do we make these things that work for our school system and work for the, the labor system? What are we doing? So I think that's changing. It's made me think about the things in the future,
Mhm.
not in an like, oh no, anxiety type of way. It's made me think about, like, I can't wait till we get to a point where we don't have to fight with XYZ to get our child
Mhm.
the things that they need and deserve. When is that point? So I feel like it's made me more of the advocate in the way that I want to do that hard work. Like, I
Mhm.
want to be able to sit up there with the legislators and go, we're not doing this, because who's it going to serve? You know what I mean? I want to
Yeah.
be that. So I think it just gives me just a different platform, and it just
Mhm.
gives me a different passion, because I feel like I'm following Anian on his, how he's going is how I'm going to go. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? The
Yeah.
things that he struggles with, that will let me know. And then I meet other people that struggle with the same things once I put it out there. So I feel like it just made me just kind of absorb those things more
Mhm.
goal oriented, and kind of what I want the future to look like, more planning, but also trying to just figure out how do we make this work so that the world is inclusive, and not just saying we're aware. How do we
Mhm.
make it inclusive and fair, and how do we make things good across the board, and how do we make people not struggle? You know what I mean? When they're already, for some people, they're struggling already, but how do
Mhm.
we make this, just across the line, just fair for everyone, and it just makes you see so many things differently. Because I think I
Mhm.
tell people, like, unless you're in that community,
Yeah.
then you just don't know until you jump in there, and then you're like, wow. So I think that goes for
Mhm.
anyone getting into anything different where you feel like you have to make a difference. But I know it's caused me to meet some wonderful, wonderful people, and some other trailblazers who are doing things in their community and making changes. And I think that's just, it keeps me going. That's how it changes. It's like, it's not the end.
Mhm.
I'm not tired yet. So let's see where this goes, right?
Yeah. Oh, that's fantastic. What are your hopes and even your dreams for your books? I think you've kind of touched on it here and there, but
Yeah, honestly, I would love to get a good series, and I would love to get like a cartoon. I would love there to be some more
Mhm.
inclusivity in that. I would love to, you know, we're anywhere you sell books online, but I would love to finally walk through a Barnes and Noble and see it on the shelves.
Mhm.
I would love for there just to be, so much education in the books. And I want to be able to partner with those experts, like speech therapists and
Mhm.
OT and things like that, to add those in the books, because that's part of the lives of many of our children.
Mhm.
And those educational specialists, I want to add those on the books, because that's just real. But that's what I see. I just see more. Again, I don't have a stopping point.
Mhm.
But he leads me and I
Yeah.
leads the way. So I don't know. I see great things, but for him, I wouldn't mind something like a cartoon. I wouldn't mind something different, so we
Mhm.
can actually see it, the movement. We can actually see our children going about the world, and it could be a story,
Mhm.
and it could be a regular thing. But I just imagine, like, oh my gosh, so many things that you can learn like that,
Yeah.
because as we're doing the books, and we all know how hard children are in education. You have to bring the skills in a different way, possibly math, reading, whatever. Can you imagine how many other people that would help? Not just kids with Down syndrome, but
Mhm.
just how we teach kids today. I think we've learned during the pandemic that they don't need all this extra, millions of hours of school. They could have something different. And I think that that's kind of what I look forward to, just keeping them in the series, letting the nine lead it,
Mhm.
making it educational, bringing more experts into it, and them to go far.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, I always believe, go big or go home. So
Right. Yeah. So we're shooting for that cartoon.
I love it.
Yeah.
I think that's a fabulous idea. It never even entered my mind, but I think that would be pretty awesome. You never know. You
Yeah.
never know.
Yep. Yep.
You
Yep. Yep.
know, for me and I'm sure for you as well, I don't want others who are in our community to feel alone. And one of the wonderful things about your books is that Black families with a child with Down syndrome can realize there are other families just like theirs out there. And that your book is, as I said, fantastic for any child that is heading into kindergarten and even the subsequent books. Like, anyone can read them. And it's awesome that your teachers and Ian's teachers were reading them and sharing them with the class. I mean, that's really fantastic. And Meeka, where can people find your books?
So we do have a website. It's brownbaby321.com. You can purchase the books there. And anywhere books are sold online. So if you're an Amazon shopper, Barnes & Noble, Target, anywhere books are sold online, you can find the books. You can simply just Google a Friend Anian. And again, our website is brownbaby321.com.
Oh, we'll definitely put that in the show notes so that people can find the book. And and as I said again, it's great, if your kids are going into kindergarten, anyone can read the books. It's really fantastic. So when do you think the fourth book is going to be out?
I don't know. It depends on when I have to set my mind on once I do that. I think the second book I think I wrote in a day. I think the
Wow.
third book, because I think I was just going over like, ooh, how do you start? And even though I have an editor, I still want to give her something good.
Yeah.
Like, I don't want her to be working all hours of the night. I just want to help a little bit. So I try to do some things, but this year I can't say when, but I always try to target, because we have World Down Syndrome Day in March, but Down Syndrome Awareness Month is October. So it's probably October. That's
Okay.
leaning more towards that since it's already January. But yeah, I'd like to release them on those monumental days and things like that.
Oh, that's wonderful. And is there anything else you would like to share?
Like I said, if you have a story, if you have a book, if you have something that you feel is missing, write it, show it, share it, whatever you need to do. Because we need that. Because like you said, sometimes you just don't know what you don't know, and it gives you an opportunity to see someone else's world and how they're living, and see how you can be a part of that. But I just encourage everyone. I'm not the only one who can write a book. I want everyone to write one, because we need a good library for our students. The schools are needed, and the healthcare is needed, and we need them. So write. Thank you.
Oh, you're more than welcome. And thank you, Meeka, for so much for coming on today and sharing your story. It was really lovely to chat with you. I'm glad you're on the road to recovery, and I'm looking forward to the next book. So maybe when the next book is out, we can have you on again.
Yes, I would love that. Perfect. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thanks for listening to the T21Mom podcast. And if you'd like to find out more information about Meeka's books and her series on her son Anian, you can go to brownbaby321.com. And as always, I would love to hear from you. Tell me your stories, what's important to you, what's going on in your life. You can email me at info@t21mom.com. You can also find me on Facebook, and I'm also on Instagram and Twitter at Trisomy21Mom. So keep on loving on your rockin' kiddos, and I'll see you next time.
You know it's not what I expected, but I'm beginning to enjoy the view. T21 Mom.